Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of KingQuest, which is my personal quest to read and watch every single thing that has been associated with Stephen King. As this is the second episode, I am going to be discussing about his second book, Salem's Lot, a book about vampires taking over America, or specifically Maine, because that's where Stephen King lives. That's where all of his books, if not close by Maine, is going to be associated with Maine in some way, shape, or form. Um, let's see here. I guess the best way of just starting it out for me is just honestly going through all the different tropes that is off the bat with Stephen King inside of this book, just like the common things that you'll see as it progresses. Well, first off, I guess like the setup with Stephen I keep saying Stephen King. The setup with Salem's Lot is the writing style is definitely a lot more uniform now, where Carrie was a bit more loose form with like the flashbacks and the flash forwards. Here we get the structure of Stephen King's yeah, how do I phrase this? I'm trying to think about it. Um, this is where we get the structure that he's known for, where each chapter per se is like a section where it talks generally about this is going to be the topic. So it's either going to be a character or a place. And from there, within it, there's like little chapters. Like it'll be like numbered one, two, three, all the way up until the section has been finished. So I guess it's sort of formatted like the Bible in the way where you'd say, like, Book of John, verse 2, section 3, or section 3, verse 2. Chapter 3, section verse. Fuck, this is going great, isn't it? Um, but yeah, with these different sections, it could be like pages and pages long for the different chapters, or honestly, sometimes the chapters can just be like a 2 sentence update of like a situation that is very important, but in the current section, it doesn't really get much way to expand upon. So he's known for like giving either pages or sentences in these little mini chapters of his writing. We also get to see his with each section that he does, he quotes like a what he'll do is like he'll have a quote from either a book, another person, or like some music. Uh, he'll just like quote it in the beginning of the section as either a reference to what the characters are thinking or just the situation overall. Like for example, here in the third section, it talks about he quoted a little bit from The Emperor of Ice Cream, which is in association with the death. And we see our main characters thinking about that same quote and just like it just spontaneously came to them and what they are going to, how it like relates to them in this situation. So it's like a fun little puzzle, I guess you could say, of just like reading multiple quotes from various sources, completely different sources that aren't related to each other except for the topic, and just trying to figure out like how it pieces together. Other tropes here with Salem's Lot, we have Maine. This is set in Salem's Lot, Jerusalem's Lot in Maine, so locations Maine. We have our small town, so a lot of the writing inside of here is based on the small town dramas that we get, interpersonal relationships, how one people or one person deals with people, like talks to another person who then talks to other people. So you just sort of like see how it's all interconnected personally. We also get to see writer first off, well, third off at this point. Ben Mears, our main character, our protagonist, at least like one of the team good guys here. He is a writer, which is going to be a notable thing going forward with Stephen King. He has a lot of protagonists as writers, like write what you know, and he wants to be a writer, so he writes about writers. I'm trying to think other things, which is I was actually excited to see. He has very King turn of phrases that you don't I don't know if it's like a main thing or a him thing, but he'll write like specific phrases that are like 100% coded to him. Like he wrote the words goose flesh instead of using the words goosebumps. I don't know if that's like most known in like the Northeast area in like that subsection of states. But I got really excited when I actually read the words goose flesh. I'm like, ooh, hey, look, a king thing. Fun. Inside of a king book. Interesting. And then, like, I guess, like, other deeper topics, which will be touched upon in a bunch of his other later series, is that this is a book that's definitely, well, it's 100% coded with vampires. It's Dracula, basically, but if Dracula fled the Nazis and then decided to hold up inside of Maine, rural Maine, before anyone catches wind of him. Because I guess, spoilers, in case you don't know, I was piecing together in my mind mentally his Barlow, the centuries old vampire, where he stated specifically he was older than Christianity to begin with as a religion. His cover story for his human persona that he is going around with is that he is an old, eccentric furniture seller that ran away from the Nazis in 1939, 1940 when a bunch of documentation and paperwork got, destroyed. So he ran away to England to run away to America once the timing is right. So, yeah, his cover story is I was trying to avoid being persecuted by evil when, in fact, I am the greatest evil of all. Something that I thought was, like, pretty funny to read. But this goes back to, like, the other thing that I've noticed with, like, King tropes. He has good versus evil. And, like, that's definitely played upon in The Stand, like, later on when we read that, of, like, goodness versus, it's not goodness versus badness, it's capital G good versus capital E evil, where he doesn't view these entities as topics of morality as we would view them. They are mentioned, especially in this book, with the church and like fighting against capital E evil of Barlow the vampire. They're more of like an elemental force is how how it was described in this book, where the topic of goodness is just being on, like, if it's a chessboard, being on the side of white, the white knight, the white pieces, harnessing the I'm not gonna finish that sentence. Harnessing the powers of good to be personified as righteousness. Whereas evil, capital E evil, is personified as, being dark, wicked, tempting, more sinister and malicious. Like, it's not just giving into temptation, because anyone, human or otherwise, can give into temptation, but it's just being consumed by the evil that is tempting you with. Like, if you go too far to the point where you can't, whether of your own free will or not, when you go into it, you can't get out, and so it just like possesses and consumes you to be something other than yourself. So this is definitely like touches on that topic of what do you do in the face of pure good? What do you do in the face of pure evil? How do you fight against that? And unfortunately, just seeing all the people that, die along the way inside of this like terrible reckoning of evil, and how do we stop this? With that in mind, we also bring up evil as a location, which I think King does pretty well. Like, evil as a, like, capital E evil is a force. So he has a thing where this force of evil, when the conditions are right, can just seep in and blend itself into a location, sort of like a contamination of sorts, where the place isn't just evil because of the people in it, it is evil because of the evil that is possessing it. And we see this through the mansion, the uh Marston house is what it's called. The lone, scary house that is on top of the hill, as creepy as it could come, called specifically a dark idol hovering over the town. That is where the evil has first manifest. And we learn bits and pieces of the story as to how this evil came to be with the man, Marston, who had possessed this house before and had died, and no one else moved in until Barlow came about. So we don't have like the full official story as to what's going on, but we have a general idea of the vampire essentially contacted him in order to break, like, decades ago, in order to eventually 50 some years later, or 30 some years later. I think that's happened like around the 1940s, like late 30s, 40s. So excuse me if my timeline drawn, but it's like 30 years ago it eventually happened. So it was like decades in the making for Barlow to sneak his way in and move in. Of just like the evil that was done into this house to make sure that it is ready for more evil to move in. Um, which I guess I could go on about how this book continues to discuss evil, because King definitely has put in a lot of thought as to, well, how would a vampire officially move? Like, what would that entail if they were capital E evil? And he brings in a lot of religious thoughts and ideas to it for both the good and evil. Again, capitalize. Um you have, what he does is that you can't just, he can't just move in. He has to like move in on contaminated ground, is the best way of putting it, where instead of it being holy, it is unholy. Instead of it being like blessed, it has been cursed. So reading through this book, you pick up the pieces, you pick up the story of how the house, the location, the town itself got cursed enough and became tainted enough to allow Barlow to eventually move in, and then how it continues to like spread and infect everyone and everything. Well, so that's like the villain side of things, and I could talk about more of the Barlow and vampirism later. I think I gave them too much of a runtime for the beginning right now. But so let's talk about our actual main characters. It's been a while. We haven't even like, I've only barely mentioned our main character. So we got Ben, and again Ben's a writer. He is a famous writer, at least like a popular author who wrote 3 books. And he moves into a small town to basically purge the evil that he faced as a kid, as a child, trying to like confront his fears by writing a new book. And he ended up meeting vampires. Because that's what, happens whenever you do this. Along with him, like, he's honestly a really good guy. Like, that's what I like about King, is when you write about people, you understand what they are, and he's always been a good guy, I think. I've always liked him since, like, I've liked him since the beginning, let's be clear here, but he sort of showed off to me as him being a good person when he was dating Susan. Susan is the one of the women that lives in the town and was also team fight vampires for a brief bit when it hasn't really kicked in yet. When he was dating her, he was still dealing with the death of his wife, and his one of his internal thoughts was he wanted to respect Susan by being Susan and not just as a replacement um of his former wife, because that would have done them both a disservice. Like, it wasn't fair for, I believe her name was Miranda, it wasn't fair for her, and it wasn't fair for Susan, and that just sort of clocked me as a good person. Like, he understood what was expected, but he also like understood just like how life really works and how relationships are complex. So he wanted to make sure that like when he was going out with Susan, that he was going out for Susan specifically and not wanting her to be a replacement for what he had lost. Which is like it's a small thing, but it's those small things that build up to see the type of person that that becomes of it. Like it's not just they are instantly good and instantly bad, especially not in a Stephen King story. It builds up to seeing like the kind of person that they are, the actions that they do in their day-to-day life, and then like once it compounds throughout the rest of the story, what kind of actions, like what is their person, what is their character that they will show by the end, what kind of person will they be in times of stress, in times of struggle, in times of great danger. One fantastic example of that, which I am super happy and proud to talk about, is Mark Petrie. Mark, my little guy, my little kid, little boy. He is the best character out of this entire novel because he has his head, he has like his head on just right. He knew the assignment from day one and knew exactly what to do. Like let's give it applause to Mark here, because again, first time we met this kid, who I love with all of my heart, we do not even see him from his own point of view shot. Like, he does not get his own chapter until well after the beginning of the vampirism attacks. What we do is we see our focus is on a bully, a grade school bully that comes over to go at the new kid, go at Mark, and we just see Mark just like wipe the floor, wipe the floor with this kid, like beat the shit out of him. Not actually like a lot, but he was smart enough to know when to fight and when to take advantage of the situation to inflict the most amount of pain with the least amount of problems. Like, he's a rational kid. He thinks things through. He could try to figure out what needs to be done without, like, putting himself in too much jeopardy or in too harm's way. And that's, as we continue to read, we see this type of sensible child that he is. Even when he is fighting against undead vampires or trying to break into people's houses, he is thinking ahead of what they should be on the lookout for, what kind of person they should be wary of, like topics that the adults haven't even considered about. Well, this dude's car is still in here. We should probably wait to make sure that he's out before we go sneaking in, and maybe wait until we see like light. Like Mark was the first one that like clocks like, hey, that Straker dude, the evil bald man that sort of like does the bidding for Barlow as he continues on. Yeah, we should probably watch out for him because like even if he's not a vampire, he can have a gun, and that would be a bad thing. So we gotta hand it to Mark as like the entire time he's just a very sensible child that does not flinch in the face of evil. Like, my god, he just keeps staring down Barlow like no one has fear of God, much less a child. Like, he is 100% will face on any challenge, any topic. Good for you. I love you, Mark. Who else do we have here? There's the thing with like Stephen King, there's a ton of characters. Even if I'm not gonna gush about all of them side characters, there's just so many different plots because again, he focuses on building a world. And in order to build this world, he focuses on like these vast grand descriptions of the type of place, the location, the weather. Like, he's able to make clouds sinister, first off, because near the end of the book, when we know that, the vampires are a lot and they are coming to attack everyone. So when night is crawling closer and closer, we start to fear that the vampires are going to come out soon, and will they be safe in time? So seeing these, like, him describing the light of the sun as it goes from yellow to orange to red to night. He's describing how sinister the clouds look from being fluffy and grand to being cold and wispy and just dragging evil along with it. So he's describing the scenery around. He's describing like the town itself. And yeah, the town is as much as a character as everyone else. He has gone through so much to describe like the actual evil that it holds. The vibe of the town basically. Like it's not just one person, it's just what you would expect living in a small town and how would you live through it. That you know it as much as it knows you and knows that you will not get away. Your conformity and familiarity is too great for you to even like try to move and try to get away. Like that's the lure of these small towns. It's like once you're in here, you're gonna get cozy and you'll never want to leave because why would you when you know exactly what's gonna happen every single day when you live here? So and it goes to continue to talk about the general evil, I guess is like a good way putting it, because this book focuses like with Barlow, we have capital E evil, like he is true evil, darkness incorporated, enhanced, like out of flesh and blood or your own blood. He is the big bad, but he also talks about like the little evils that persuade, that like lives in this town, that sinks into the streets and the houses and just like also possesses the people. There's still general good people, like there's still like lowercase g good, but there's also a lot more lowercase e evil inside of this specific town. And he highlights these kinds of lowercase good and evil decisions, morality with the town folk itself. He'll give like one or two, really one chapter in each section when he highlights the town. He'll give like one section to a set of characters, a subplot, and just like highlights the type of person they really are or like in their normal day-to-day lives, and just like we just periodically visit them to see what's going on. One example of this, of like just seeing what's up, again, there's no direct correlation, it's just sort of like seeing how they live their lives and then get got by the vampires, but it just sort of like shows how this town breathes life. One example are the Sawyers. I want to remember their names. I believe they are Sawyers. Reggie and his wife. I want the. I've read this book like I already finished this book and there's so many people. There's so many goddamn people inside this book. I could barely remember exactly who their names are. I might just need to like Wikipedia this shit. But Sawyer, they essentially, the wife is cheating on her husband. And she's cheating on her husband with a milkman kid or like a delivery boy. However it is, phone line operator, I think it was. Sorry, I'm just like trying to look this up. But yeah, so you see the wife just like one, affair, bad. She's cheating on her husband while his husband is out. Two, which is Stephen King's great at crime dramas and stuff because holy shit that this part is scary. The husband catches them in the act, promises and does beat the shit out of his wife to make sure that she doesn't do it again, which I get affairs bad, but so is abuse and physical violence. More bad shit. He also again, this guy is pretty bad. He also straight up makes the affair dude, the other guy, the poor sucker boy, um he makes him basically puts his hand over the gun that he's forcing him like he's holding against the guy, and the husband clicks it, and it's empty. It's like no bullets were in there. It was an unloaded gun, but it scared the shit out of the other guy that he just faints, and that's like was terrifying, and it is terrifying. And so we see this storyline of how the affair dude eventually, like, trying to run away, gets got by Barlow and the vampires, becomes one himself, and then returns to get vengeance, to get the woman that he desires. Um, he just gets like a whole, like, just basically, like, we see these kind of vampires dealing with, like, how these small time people become vampires, and when they become vampires, what happens to, like, how do they get revenge, how do they get got with the other side. Another one that, like, shows again lowercase e evil. We see a god, this is like such a sad story, to be honest. The McDonald's, um that's like their name, the McDonald's family. The wife is a 19-year-old girl who is just newly married, but she's also, trapped inside of poverty, unable to go pursue her dreams. So what she does is, yeah, she has a child, she has a 10-month-old baby, and she beats the shit out of it. Like, she's a stressed out mom, and in order for her to deal with her situation, she physically beats her child, who is a baby and scared and doesn't know what to do. You see her dealing with this, you see her husband, like, not as caring about it, or like, he does, but he doesn't know the whole story, but he's also not exactly the greatest dude, because just lives through the motions of the day without reaching out to her too much, so he also doesn't really like his lot in life. And yeah, the tragedy of it all is, like, when we see them get turned into vampires, the baby gets turned first. So we see them, like, once the baby has been confirmed dead, because that's something that I don't know if people really mention about Salem's Lot, is like one of the first vampires to come out is a dead baby. And the dead baby became a vampire. And the 10-month-old vampire baby, like, Jesus, when people find out that it's dead, like, holy shit, that is one of the worst things a parent can ever read, is just, like, trying to deal with the loss of your child, and which also brings back to the whole thing of the reason why these vampires are able to coming in the first place is because of the sacrifice of more children. I feel like in order for capital E evil to exist, the children have to go first for some reason. Definitely in this book, because the reason why, like, the Marston house was considered bad place, bad vibes, whatever, is like there's ideas that they were sacrificing children. And then when Barlow eventually came in, they were still sacrificing children. One of the kids just permanently disappeared. He was sacrificed inside of a inside of a graveyard, churchyard, to make sure that they are permanently gone and make it unholy as possible, so, like, its holiness is not preventing them from going anywhere. And the first vampire that came out, Danny Glick, yeah, he was just like a 12-year-old kid, and his first thought was, once he got out of the coffin, bite as many people as he can and turn them into vampires. So the first vampire in this town is still a child. And we could talk about all day, like, the type of horror that happens of just, like, feeling these vampires' eyes continually staring at you, losing track of time as night comes closer and closer. We see, like, Mike, the was it graveyard attendant? That's not the word, gravekeeper. That's it. Figured that out. We see like the gravekeeper trying to do his job and still feeling like Danny's eyes on him, and then eventually getting got. Like getting bitten, getting turned, becoming sick, becoming dead. And then we see, like, if we go back to our boy Mike, we see Danny Glick coming over to Mike, and he tries to like do vampire shenanigans on him, and Mike's like, nope, and brings up that cross, brings up that crucifix, and burns him with it. So good job, Mike. Good job, Mark. Jesus Christ, did I say Mike instead of Mark? No, Mark. Just all of that. Just I'm not gonna edit anything out because I'm lazy as shit. It's already been 30 minutes, and I don't think I've even touched again remotely about like what I like about this book or any of the parts. There's just so much that happens because it's a small time thing. Like one of my favorite parts. Again, we only get like at most 5 pages out of this entire book is just dedicated to this one dude who is the Vietnam War veteran bus driver. I don't know why. It has always been my favorite part of Salem's Lot for some goddamn reason. It is like one of the parts that I completely remember reading about. Even if like my memory completely twisted what exactly happened, I still like this part. He is dealing with PTSD in the only way he knows how, which is to yell at children and kick them off of his bus and force them, elementary school kids, force them to walk for miles to get to school for whatever reason he wants. Like, they were talking too loud, they were passing notes, they did a thing to him that didn't actually do the thing. Like, he'll blame kids for messing with his bus, which I guess in the 70s you could just park your work bus. Like, you could just take the bus with you at your house and just keep it there. So is it his bus or is it a bus on loan? I'm not entirely sure. But yeah, so like he's basically a dick every single time to these kids, and he rationalizes it by like he's trying to toughen these kids up. He's going to have smooth sailing. He's not going to let anyone get the better of him, not these kids. Again, he's like, I'm pretty sure he's a PTSD. Like, he's processing things from Vietnam, but he's doing it in a terrible way. And so literal hundreds and hundreds of pages later, all the way to the final part of Salem's Lot where things are going to shit, the vampires are running amok, and we're trying to see our heroes save the day. One of the parts that happens which is like 3 pages really, is that this Vietnam War veteran bus driver hears someone messing around with his bus, believes it's children, which he's right, decides that he's gonna like beat the shit out of them for messing around with his bus and breaking his windows and stuff. But once he goes into the bus, he's surrounded by like 8 some vampire kids that just kill him, that just straight up stares at him on this bus as they're waiting for him to appear, and then they go off and just like kill him and drain his blood. I don't know why I've always liked that. For some reason, I thought that this was like in a junkyard, or like the kids were coming out of like car trunks or something. It might be a different point, or whatever, or like my memory just got like messed up over the years. Um, but I like I like this part. I don't know why. Probably because like obviously being a vampire is bad, but you don't normally get vampire children as straight up kids. You don't normally get like 8 to 9 to 14-year-old vampires. Whenever you see vampirism in like other books or movies, I think Twilight touched on it at some point or whatever, but they're like, we gotta kill the baby because they don't know how to restrain themselves. Like, other vampires don't know how to restrain themselves. They nuked a like we have a dead baby that's straight up a vampire. I don't know how it feeds, but apparently it does. Regardless, I like the idea of, maybe it's just because it's like messed up karma where he was a dick to children and the fucked up children got their revenge or messed him up, like, oh, the irony, stuff like that. Maybe it's just because a brief moment and we see it from his perspective where he's just not set up as a nice guy ever, and so he just got in the worst way imaginable? Who knows? We still haven't even touched, like, a bunch of the other characters, too. So, along with Ben and Mark as, like, team good guys, we have, like, Susan, the only girl cast in here until she's not, where she's, like, the nice girl, wants to break out, uh, trying to just deal with her having, like, a romance with Ben, being sweet about it, but also, like, independent and knows what she wants in life. Definitely more rational than she lets on, especially when facing against the vampires, because she never actually faced vampires until her own death, which I don't think it's a sexist thing. Unfortunate as it is, and I know that, like, other books and stuff or movies or whatever, you'll say that, like, the girl character or whatever, there's always, like, they gotta be damsel in distress or gotta get got in some way, shape, or form, right? But King writes women well. Like, I don't know, though people can, like, come at me about how he writes sex or whatever, like, that's its own kettle of fish. But he writes women as characters, and so you see her trying to break free, trying to, like, make ends meet, her resisting, like, she's glad that her dad likes the new guy, but she's fighting against her mom, who is pushing her and nettling her to date the other dude when she is not interested in him, and they have, like, arguments about it. She's proud of her work. She's proud of the work that she has done and wants to get out and escape, and she really does like. She's the one that initiated, like, the romance and really likes the book and just, like, has a conversation. So she's her own person. And I think it's just, like, she is a rational person, and I think that is a problem when dealing with vampires. Because it's rationality in the face of capital E evil at some points that can and will get you got if you cling too hard on what you believe is true. Yeah, a lot of the characters that I haven't yet addressed sort of fall into how their fates are somewhat sealed depending on how they fall into addressing vampires. Susan didn't really believe in the vampirism, even though she was told by credible people or people that she trusted that they were a thing. In her decision, she decided to go by herself, alone, to the Marston house where the vampires supposedly slept at to take care of the problem herself. She half-assed brought in a stake or, like, a fence post to be a stake for supplies and tried to bust in herself. And luckily enough, she ended up with Mark. Mark was the one that found her as they were walking in to try to, like, keep her safe, but unfortunately, it wasn't enough. When they got separated, she got knocked out, and she got fed to the pit, like, Barlow's basement pit of, death, essentially. It's hard to, because again, we see her, she was, like, a smart girl, she was a smart woman, she understands what exactly going on. We see the fear behind her of trying to address this, even though she doesn't understand why she's scared and why she's going with it, she still does. So it's nothing against her intelligence about what she did. She even, which is, like, ironic, which I think King would agree, she acknowledges that she's in the horror movie that she believes that she should be smarter at. And even with that as, like, a blazing warning of don't be the girl that goes into the basement where the monster's looking at, she thinks that she could be better than that in a way that doesn't reflect anything. Again, nothing on her, and her fate is a tragedy and has always been said as a tragedy, but I don't want it to be looked at that she was always going to die because she was the woman. You know, she was more than that. And, like, also a lot more other people have died for other dumber reasons or other smarter reasons. One such case, well, also other funny reasons. For example, like just a sidebar thing, when one of his minions go into a hospital to try to like shoot our heroes because, like vampires can't be out in the sun, but those that got bitten can be manipulated. She got by just 3 random people inside of this hospital that had no idea what's going on, wasn't aware of the vampires, came out of town to just go into this hospital to visit other people, and they just sort of stopped her. Like regular human beings but it's just like they weren't part of anything going on in town, but they're like, well, we're gonna stop you specifically, so bye. But like the other people, like how their fates are dealt with by their rationale of vampirism. We have our teacher. He is set up as like the mentor, Matt. We have a lot of M names. Mark, Matt, uh, Mike. Too many M names. Marston. We have too many M names for me to keep track of here. So Matt is the teacher, the English teacher, and he's sort of been set up as like the mentor, librarian, the researcher guy, the guy that like pulls in the details, pulls in the information of like what they need to do and how they need to combat it, how they need to fight it. That's his position. And he has been set up, I guess like we could address the lore here, like he's looked up like he's pulling in a lot of different information about like what we could do with the lore. Vampires need to have one stake through the heart, cut off their head, turn their head upside down, fill their mouths with garlic, throw them into a floating river. Like they were pulling out all the stops with all the vampire lore. We got like the hypnotic gazes, the gaze that pulls into your eyes, where it's just bottomless pits where you don't want to do anything except like look into the eyes and just be blissfully unaware. Death, once you're dead, you look gorgeous and beautiful, but also like this sinister supernatural vibe and element to it. And we also so like we're pulling in this information. Matt is the guy that like pulls it in on Team Good Guy to try to combat the information that Team Bad Guy knows. But he's the one that first dealt with the vampires on Team Good Guy. He was the one that introduced everyone because he saw Mike, who got by Danny. He was sick in the barn, so invited him to his house where he died in his house by Danny, and you just sort of like have this sinister, like, this part of the chapter where you hear Matt just like in bed, terrified as he hears Danny enter the house and just kill Mike. And then when when Matt and Susan are back at the house and he's trying to explain what the hell happened, he hears something to investigate upstairs and sees Mike back as his undead form, as like the body under the sheet rising to attack. And the power of Christ compels thee. The Matt manages to push back Mike out of the window and out of his house and forever get away. And we see, he gets a heart attack from it. So he's weakened, but he rationally tries to figure out, okay, so this sucks, but now, like, I've sort of confirmed that vampires are real and that this is terrible, so now I'm gonna have to, like, whoever we convince must agree that this must be the way of us to do. Work together, stay together, and to combat this evil. So his rationality to accept the vampirism, it also reflects a bit on Mark, which King does point out. Children are more likely to accept the big E evil than adults. Adults are sort of like, by the time that we've grown up, we're sort of set in our worldview, whereas children are not. So while when fighting against a vampire, Matt was pushed to the hospital because of a heart attack, Mark, perfectly fine, because like, oh, so you are a vampire. Cool, I'm gonna burn your ass with a stake, and then I'm gonna fall asleep and figure out what to do next. Like, good for that kid. So we have, like, the rational people accepting vampirism, the rational people that sort of half-ass did or did not, and in the end sort of paid the price for it. Then we also have our religious people, like Father Callahan. He's the I wouldn't say drunk, but he's definitely an alcoholic priest of like the Catholic Church that's inside town. And he is the one that should be the representative of capital G good, which, well, I mean, like, he is good, but his arc is around the fact that the times have changed from where he was at. He is a bit reflective and upset, or at least like ill prepared for the new evils. Like, he wanted to fight against capital E evil. He, based on the timelines, he probably as a child grew up about Nazi stories and like how we fought against the Nazis in World War II and won, and so he wanted to, when he became a priest, to fight against the capital E evil, like what he learned about during, like what he like heard about the war. And he wanted sort of like Vietnam to be his capital E evil, but that was a mixed bag of morality. And when he grew up and when he was trying to deal with this stuff, he can't he doesn't know how to interact with mundane evil, is the phrase. He doesn't understand or know how he can combat like civil rights, how he could help with feminism, how he can help with the gay community, how he could fight against racial profiling, all of these mundane evils that regular people can do. There is no one guy that can get got and then everything solves the problem. No, there's like other things going on. It is a multifaceted issue that is being dealt with, and it it's like he doesn't know where to go with it, and he doesn't try. He's sort of stuck trying to help people but that are sick with this mundane evil and never change no matter what he does, or the his lack of action, I think, is what is the cause for it. And I think that is the problem that plagues him up until the end, is that he always wanted to fight against capital E evil, and when he was able to hear about vampires, know about Barlow being the, big bad evil guy, capital E evil, he got excited. He managed to actually fight off, like, open the door, power of Christ, his holy light, like, blessing through everyone. Like, he still has faith in God and faith that goodness is a force that they can use. So he is excited and prepared, at least like he is willing to fight against capital E evil, but I don't think he was ever prepared for it because he wasn't able to deal with the mundane evil of this town. He was hearing, like, back to the McDonald's, or yeah, back to like the wife like punching her baby, the mother like hitting her child and like injuring him very bad. What Father Callahan wants to do is like choke her, like act of vengeance, stop being evil, stop being wrong. But he doesn't, but he also doesn't like talk to her about her, help it. All he does is listen to confessions and sin without actually addressing the root cause of these evils. He doesn't take the time from what we see to actually interact with the community to help promote goodness, rather than his idealism of being capital G good and fighting for the side of capital G good, which I think is ended up being the curse and problem of one of the best scenes that we get out of Stephen King out of this entire book is the showdown between Barlow and Father Callahan after the death of Mark's parents. Because he made a deal, or at least like Father Callahan had, how do I phrase it? He didn't say yes, but Barlow had asked, if you face me without holding the cross, like, if I let the boy go, would you face me without holding the cross? Would you like face me without your icon of God? Only your belief. And the father said yes. He was unsure about it, but he would say anything in order to try to get Mark to be let go. Barlow did let Mark go, and Mark, swore vengeance. Good on you, child. Ran off. But when the time came to show it, and Barlow was sort of taunting Father Callahan, he was not able to let go of the cross. He started to waver in his faith, and it sort of became his wavering of his faith was not wavering in God per se, but in his fear that it was the item that protected him, and without his protection, he would be under the wrath of Barlow. So, like, his misplaced ideals of what of how God or how goodness manifests itself eventually weakened him and allowed Barlow to curse him, essentially. I don't know if he turned into an official vampire or was just cursed to be an outcast for all eternity. That was sort of the thing that was left up open-ended by the end of the book. But we see like the struggles and how he was not ready or prepared to face them is the unfortunate effect of what he was dealing with. So we have like the religious side of things trying to rationale vampires. He understood like that good can fight off like, uh crucifixes, popsicle sticks. Also, let's give a shout out to Jimmy. He's our resident scientist, doctor type figure in all of this, trying to figure out like medically how vampires work. When they were going to study vampires in a autopsy, he was like, I don't have a cross, but don't worry. Put two tongue depressors together. We got our cross and it's good to go. So good for him. Also, he combats vampires using science. More like if vampirism is a virus that is sinking into him, which he got bit, sucks. But he gave himself a tetanus shot, which I don't know if vampirism counts as tetanus, but I guess it did because he gave himself a tetanus shot and then just like gave himself some ibuprofen or whatever and then put a band-aid on it and they blessed him and then it cured his vampirism. So he fought against vampires with the power of science. Good for you. We don't normally get that in other vampire lore books or other vampire. It's usually just like all the superstition, but I like the idea that it's a virus that sets in and would eventually kill you off, but if you get it just in time, like sort of like hacking off a limb when a zombie bites you, so that way you won't turn into a zombie yourself. Yeah, we need to see more of the science aspect of to fight against vampirism, which unfortunately doesn't really help Jimmy at the end of it because they keep having their numbers whittled down and down unintentionally, and he eventually also got. Though I will say he remained human when he got. When he wasn't killed by the vampires, he was just fell into a trap, fell into like an empty staircase, and plummeted to his pointy knife death. So unfortunately for Jimmy, we sort of like last left with our town with our all the other side characters that I've been talking about how they deal with their rationale of vampire stuff. Yeah, they ended up getting got at the very end. There is barely any survivors. The end of the book is just like the town is turned into vampires more or less, and so we just sort of cleanse it all by burning it down. fires fix things, is how this book ends. And then they just sort of kill the remaining vampires, and like what it's implied is what's gonna happen. But man, there's just like a lot of good things about this book. Just the pacing, how the characters interact, how we believe, how we see like the plots of characters that are being progressed through the point of view of other characters, how we know that Barlow is evil, capital E evil, and he is smart. He is an intelligent man. He's also egotistical and has beef with a child because, yeah, Mark, our boy, managed to kill the familiar. He like bonked Straker in the head to the point where he just died and got killed. And so like Barlow specifically has beef with this one child. It is the greatest thing. Like, this kid cannot be stopped, and we applaud him for it. Barlow's just like gunning for him specifically out of everyone. But like, so we like see all of this being pieced together, and just the slow burn of it all, of like seeing how this town exists, seeing how everyone else interacts with this town and each other in any sort of situation, and seeing how it just gets possessed slowly and slowly until vampires remain and nothing else. Even if Barlow is dead, unfortunately, the evil that is the vampires still is persistent. They are stupid and new, but they still exist to lurk among people until, the Great Fire Cleansing of 1975. That's not even like, I sort of, before we end here, because I've been talking for, God, a good hour here, but I just want to highlight a lot of the lines that because I've been taking notes on this, and I tried touching on this stuff that I found, but honestly, I don't even think I touched like nearly half of the things that I wrote about. But I just sort of want to like highlight some of the lines that I loved reading that Stephen King put in his book. Death was when the monsters get you. Like, that's a child understanding that Mark has about what death means as a kid when they're talking about Robbie and Danny dying and becoming disappeared. Like, what a line. What a line to explain that to a child. The other one is, he was in peril of more than his life. Father Callahan understanding that it wasn't just his life, but his immortal soul that was on stake when you fight or deal with vampires like this. Then we have his logic was the logic of nerve endings. The act of moving forward at all became heroism. Like, Mark is my boy, he is my child. Those are the lines when he was inside of the Marston house, gagged, traumatized, like trying to be fed up to the vampires. And he is fighting it in the only way he knows how, by listening to the knowledge that he read about Houdini and trying to get out of there one step at a time. Like, moving forward in the face and surrounded by like great evil. Moving forward is the act of heroism. The act of moving forward at all became heroism. And I think that is a very important line to just remember no matter what. Like, going forward is bravery in and of itself. And I think I just sort of want to end it there. Like, Mark is my solid favorite character because he does no wrong throughout any of this. And I sort of want to stop right there. I think that's a good place to have it. So where should I... God, where do I put this book at? Because this is a great Stephen King book. It's definitely in like the top tier category stuff. Like, it is not like, if C is mid, like a regular book, which is fine, but Salem's Lot is at least an A category, I should say. Let's see here. If I put Salem Lot in A, I mean, it is a long book, definitely. Even like the small book that I have, there's so many words on each of the pages. But I gotta give it up to just like how it blends the romance, how it blends like small town personal beef, how fantastically evil and eloquent Barlow is, how it's not just excuse me, how it's not just evil as evil, but also evil as like smart evil. They got eventually when the heroes catch up to them, but they were always one step ahead, so they were always well and truly sinister. And like just the word and the details and descriptions of how scary and dark them being turned into vampires or just like the deaths themselves. Yeah, I think definitely that this is in the A category uh of the Stephen Kings. Not yet my favorite, I don't think, but definitely a solid choice here. It's like one of the like again, 2 out of 2. Stephen King has been writing very well for like his first 2 books, at least in my opinion here. So we're just gonna go ahead and keep it there, and I'll see you at the next episode where we'll be watching Harry, the 1976 movie. Take care, y'all.